The Florida sun beat down on the concrete launch pad of Ether Dynamics, a private space company known for its ambitious Mars mission. The launch was just days away. The entire team was working at a frantic pace. Among the sea of lab coats, techs, and engineers was a boy, not in uniform, not on the payroll, just a 17-year-old with grease-streaked jeans, an old t-shirt, and a wrench he never seemed to let go of. His name was Eli, the son of Hector Ruiz, the facility's head mechanic. Everyone at Ether knew Hector, quiet, humble, and brilliant with machines. But few paid any mind to Eli. To most of the team, he was just the mechanic's kid who hung around after school, too curious for his own good. Some tolerated him, others mocked him. A few engineers rolled their eyes every time he walked too close to the rocket or peered at the diagnostic panels like he understood them. It was on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 days before launch, that things shifted forever. The rocket, Orion 4, had undergone a series of automated system checks. Everything was supposed to be perfect, but a warning flashed on the internal engine control diagnostics. One of the combustion regulators, critical for in-flight adjustment, was behaving erratically. It was a rare issue, one not seen before, and it sent the entire team into crisis mode. Dr. Halvorsen, the lead engineer, gathered his top staff in the mission bay. They ran simulations, tried manual overrides, even contacted the manufacturer. Nothing worked. Replacing the regulator would delay the launch by weeks and cost millions. Halvorsen was furious. The board was on edge, and through all this, Eli watched. Quietly. Listening. Absorbing. That evening, long after most of the team had gone home, Hector stayed behind with 2 other mechanics to inspect the physical component. Eli stayed too, helping hand his father tools. His eyes never left the control valve. At one point, while Hector was deep in discussion, Eli stepped closer and crouched by the access panel, examining the worn housing of the regulator. He touched it gently, then with more confidence, opened the auxiliary casing and peered at the nanowire assembly underneath. He noticed something, a misalignment, a microscopic coil thread, just a hair off from its connection point. Not broken, just shifted. He had seen something like this before. 2 years ago, Eli had rebuilt an old weather drone from the junkyard. It had a similar assembly issue caused by thermal expansion. He remembered using a graphite stabilizer and micropulse soldering to fix it. Carefully, he asked one of the engineers nearby for a thermal readout of the regulator. The engineer scoffed. "Why? You think you're going to fix it with duct tape, kid?" Eli shrugged, not answering. But the data confirmed what he suspected. He turned to his father. "Poppy, I think I can fix this." Hector looked up, surprised. "Eli, I know it sounds crazy, but I've seen this before. If we just reinforce the secondary contact and recalibrate the pulse frequency." Before he could finish, Halvorsen walked in, having overheard the exchange. "You've seen this before?" he repeated, incredulous. "On what?" "Your PlayStation." The room erupted in laughter. One engineer mimicked Eli's words in a mocking tone. "Just recalibrate the frequency, right, genius?" Eli's cheeks burned red. He looked down, gripping his wrench, but Hector didn't laugh. He placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Let him try." Halvorsen raised an eyebrow. "With what authority?" "Mine," Hector said firmly. "We've got nothing to lose. If he's wrong, it's still broken. If he's right." Halvorsen sighed, clearly irritated, but gestured toward the panel. "Fine. You've got 10 minutes, boy wonder." Eli got to work. His hands moved with a mix of caution and confidence. He used a fiber optic viewer to confirm the alignment issue, then adjusted the housing with a precision solder pen. Every move was small, careful, focused. The room went silent as they watched. Finally, he stepped back. "Run the check again." The engineer who had mocked him earlier rolled his eyes, but tapped a few commands into the console. The system hummed. Lights flickered. Then, green. No error. No warning. The regulator was functioning at 100% efficiency. A stunned silence followed. Halvorsen blinked at the monitor, then looked at Eli, as if seeing him for the first time. No one spoke. Eli simply nodded, wiped his hands on a rag, and whispered, "It just needed a real eye." The next morning, the news had spread through the facility like wildfire. The mechanic's son had fixed what a team of PhDs couldn't. But more than that, his humility, his quiet focus, had touched something deeper. Reporters came. Interviews were requested, but Eli kept a low profile. He told everyone it was a team effort, that he just remembered a problem from an old drone he once fixed. The engineers who had laughed now gave him nods of respect in the hallway. Some even asked for his input. 3 days later, the launch went ahead. The Orion 4 lifted from the pad in a perfect arc, blazing into the sky on a flawless trajectory. In mission control, Halvorsen stood behind Eli and his father, a quiet smile on his lips. He leaned down and whispered, "You saved this mission, and you taught us something more valuable than rocket science." Eli looked at him, unsure what to say. "You reminded us that talent doesn't come from titles," Halvorsen said. "It comes from heart." Back at home, Hector and Eli sat on their small porch, watching the stars. The sound of crickets filled the air. "You were amazing," Hector said. Eli grinned. "You always told me to listen to the machine. And you did. Better than most." There was a long pause. "Do you think I'll ever work on a real team, Poppy?" Eli asked quietly. "Not just in the shadows." Hector looked at him, eyes soft. "You already did. And not just any team, the one that reached the stars." Eli leaned back, watching the trail Orion 4 had left behind. A quiet satisfaction filled his heart, not because of the praise or headlines, but because, when it mattered, he'd helped. Something bigger than himself. He had proven that kindness isn't weakness, that humility doesn't mean invisibility, that even the smallest hands, when guided by love and courage, can touch the heavens. And somewhere, high above the earth, the rocket carried more than fuel and machinery. It carried a silent tribute to a boy who dared to believe he belonged. The success of the Orion 4 launch turned out to be more than just a technical achievement. It became a symbol of quiet genius, a human story hidden beneath layers of wires and codes. Over the next few weeks, articles surfaced with headlines like "Team Mechanic Saves Mars Launch" and "Rocket Fixed by Kid with a Wrench." But the fame never sat comfortably with Eli. He didn't want camera flashes or interviews. What meant more to him was the way the engineers treated him differently now. They asked for his thoughts. They invited him into briefings. And sometimes, they just sat with him over lunch, listening, not laughing. One afternoon, Halvorsen invited Eli into his office. "You know," the engineer began, "I've led projects for NASA, SpaceX, and even the Japanese Space Agency. But I've never seen someone fix a regulator with a stabilizer pin and a pencil solder." Eli smiled shyly. "I just saw what it needed." "That's not just skill," Halvorsen said. "That's intuition. That's rare." He paused, then slid a sealed envelope across the desk. "That's why I pulled some strings. Early admission, full scholarship, to Caltech's Aeronautical Engineering program. Starts next spring." Eli blinked, stunned. "Me? You," Halvorsen said. "You've already got more hands-on experience than half the freshmen there." Eli looked down at the envelope, then back at the man who had once laughed at him. But there was no pride in his eyes now, only respect. "I'll think about it," Eli said. Halvorsen chuckled. "Of course. Just don't take too long. The stars are waiting." But as the days passed, Eli found himself torn. Caltech was a dream. But Hector had been slowing down lately. His hands trembled sometimes, and his cough had gotten worse. Years of inhaling engine fumes had taken a toll. The doctors warned him to rest, to stop. Eli couldn't leave him alone. Not yet.so instead of flying to California, Eli stayed. He took on more work in the garage, helped his father rebuild old systems for local companies. When NASA called Hector to consult on a booster design, Eli went with him and ended up impressing the entire panel with his observations. Word spread. He wasn't just the mechanic's kid anymore. He was Eli Ruiz, problem solver, listener, the boy who saved a rocket and never bragged once. One day, as father and son finished repairing a wind turbine at a community school, a young girl approached them. "Are you the rocket kid?" she asked. Eli smiled. "I guess I am." She held up a crumpled notebook filled with doodles of spaceships, engine diagrams, and handwritten formulas. "I want to be like you," she said. "But they say I'm too small to fix anything." Eli knelt beside her, looked her in the eyes. "Small hands built the stars," he said softly. "Don't ever forget that." She smiled, held up her notebook like it was a blueprint to destiny, and ran back to her classroom. That night, Eli sat on the roof of their small house, looking up again at the streaks of light painted across the Skied, he thought about the path that had brought him here, not one carved by credentials or status, but by heart, by listening, by quietly fixing what others overlooked. In a world obsessed with loudness, he had chosen humility. In a world chasing glory, he had chosen kindness. And somehow, those choices had echoed all the way to the stars. Hector joined him, handing him a steaming mug of tea. "You ever wonder what it would have been like to take that scholarship?" he asked gently. "Sometimes," Eli admitted. "But then I think about all we've done together. And I realize, the universe has its own plans. Maybe mine wasn't to ride rockets. Maybe it was to build people who will." Hector looked at him, pride welling in his eyes. "You already are." From that day on, Eli began teaching free workshops at local schools. He mentored kids, built low-cost tech kits for underfunded communities, and even co-founded a nonprofit that trained youth in mechanical engineering using salvage materials. They called it Project Orion Spark. NASA awarded him an honorary medal a year later, not for saving a rocket, but for igniting thousands more. And the launch team? Many of them stayed in touch. Some even volunteered in Eli's programs. They often told new recruits the story of the boy who wasn't supposed to be there, the one they all laughed at, until he reminded them what brilliance really looks like. IT doesn't wear lab coats. It doesn't demand credit. Sometimes, just walks quietly with a wrench, sees what no one else sees, and fixes it.